Welcome back to the Skylanders Ultimate Nightmare series, where I will play a solo run with every Skylander on Nightmare mode to see which Skylanders and which of their upgrade paths are better. Starting out today, we've got Hex on the Bone Crafter upgrade path. Here, the upgrades you get are that the Bone Wall damages enemies who touch it, the Skull Rain takes much less time to cast, and so does the Bone Wall, and Skull Rain does increase damage. Hex's Series 2 Soul Gem will be very relevant this run. It allows you to charge up your Skull Rain and then conjure a giant Skull Pout instead of launching those skulls off. And the Skull Buddy is kind of notorious for being insanely powerful. You'll see it in the clips here soon enough, but whenever it attacks, it deals over 200 damage. And even on Nightmare mode, that tends to be powerful enough to one or two shot a lot of the enemies. And the upgrade that makes your Skull Rain charge faster is going to be super useful for this because you can summon the Skull Buddy much more often. Now this attack is so powerful, it's kind of going to overshadow every other move in Hex's kit, but they still definitely have their uses. For example, you can summon the Bone Wall and hide behind it, as that'll make charging up this attack much safer. And the Bone Wall, of course, counts as a distraction, by which I mean enemies will sometimes target it instead of you, which can be really useful for getting them off your back. The Bone Wall can even damage enemies as you summon it, and not just with this upgrade. But a big part of Hex's strategy while on this upgrade path is to summon that wall and to stay behind it. Whether it is you want to use the Soul Gem, the secondary attack as normal, or the primary attack behind it. For as powerful as it is, it may not always be the best idea to summon the Skull Buddy, because you have to walk up next to the enemies in order to use it, and Hex kinda likes to be at a range due to not having a good get off me option. The Bone Wall works for that, but is a little risky. But not only that, the Skull Buddy can be pretty unreliable. It sits above Hex and rotates around, and will only actually fire enemies if you're facing them, and it will get cancelled if you get hit during the move, which also is the way that the secondary attack works as you're charging it. Now the rotating may not seem like a huge downside, but it's kind of finicky. It doesn't always detect that there's an enemy there, and it sometimes just does not shoot, no matter what you do. But if you can stick with it, the reward is massive. For example, at the end of Brock's arena here, you can see me summon the Skull Buddy, wait for my opportunity to strike, and take down Brock in 2 hits before any of the life spell punks spawn in. Now that's not to say the normal Skull Rain is useless. Whenever you have just a small moment, you can always charge up only 1 or 2 of the skulls and fire them off a little more quickly. Or you can send up all 4 at once and start spamming the main attack while they're coming down. Not to mention, some enemies have such low health that it's not even worth going for the Skull Buddy, and you can just kill them with a few normal attacks. But the ones that do have a lot of health, well, it's not going to feel like they have a lot. The Wall of Bones is perfect for blocking single projectiles like from these executioners, and it gives you ample time to charge up whatever you want. In my case here, I prefer to use the regular Skull Rain, or else you'd have to go in close to those guys. This has got to be one of the only times I've killed the Goliath Drow in this section before the Mohawk Cyclopses. If you didn't know, the Executioners have 2 attacks. They throw their axe or they spin around and teleport, but they'll never use that spinning and teleporting move unless you get close to them. So just keep your distance with Hex, set up the Bone Wall, and the kill is free. And as you may expect, the Bone Fortress, not as useful against enemies who don't move. Now, as Hex has no mobility moves, the ice skating section did scare me a little bit, but the Skull Rain combined with the last second emerging Bone Wall was enough to take him out quick. Over here in the Snow Pit section, that's what I'm calling it now, it can be a little difficult for characters who don't have super high DPS because the Executioners will drop in, the Bag of Booms will come out of nowhere and start throwing bombs, making nowhere safe. But Hex has no problem with this, of course, because the Skull Buddy does 280 damage in a splash radius. What were they thinking? As much as I've been praising the Bone Wall, it does not protect you from everything. Some things can in fact go through it, so be careful of that. And I guess also be careful of the Bark Demons from the side, but that's where the Bone Crafter run is going to end. Now we get to take a look at the Shade Master upgrade path. If you hold your primary attack, the range of your orbs gets increased by a lot. The orbs do increased damage, and they explode, damaging nearby enemies. Now it doesn't mention it, but if you're holding the move to extend its range, Hex does have to stand still, and of course can't do any other moves in the process, so it is a little bit limiting, and I don't like using it too much. Another thing not explained too well in the upgrades is that her attack here can home in on enemies a little bit, and I believe that homingness is improved a little bit on this upgrade path, and that can be pretty helpful. Although it apparently didn't help me in whatever scenario that is. Now despite not having the increased conjure speed on this upgrade path, the Skull Buddy is in fact still worth it. 280 damage is quite a bit more than 13 from the primary attack, so I'm still going to be overly relying on that move throughout this run. And the Bone Wall is also slower to set up, so it's a little bit less easy to set that up and hide behind it while charging up the Wow Pow. I think I called it the Soul Gem upgrade earlier, but no, this is the Wow Pow. What the Soul Gem does is allows you to damage and knock back enemies while charging the Skull Rain, but before launching it. It's neat and all, but the best that you'll probably get with it is just killing some chompies around you. Unless it doesn't work for some reason. Why didn't it kill them? It should have worked. My strategy of running away from enemies and very quickly turning around to attack is a little bit easier with this upgrade path due to the orbs exploding on impact and having a better splash radius because of it. And of course the increased damage helps. Throughout a lot of this run, but in particularly in this arena, I had quite a bit of trouble not getting hit, which as I mentioned earlier cancels the Skull Buddy attack. By the way, does it bother anyone else that the asset used for this attack is just the Skull Mask from Spyro's Adventure? Like, did Hex team up with that, or is it a different one that they just look identical? I don't know. Even if it's a little bit harder to charge up on this upgrade path, it is still 100% worth it to one cycle Brock. Here you can see me use the long distance orbs a little bit, but I don't really see the use for them. It's probably just better to launch out multiple extra copies of the attack than to have one attack have a little bit extra range, right? The move's already got pretty good range, but if you want more, then use the secondary attack. I tried to make use of the downtime here. Before the enemies spawn, charge up the Skull Buddy, surprise them with an ambush that one-shots them, but I ended up not getting the Skull Buddy to attack properly and paid the price for it. Slipping around on the ice here accidentally caused me to use the Bone Wall and trap the enemy next to myself, which was definitely not what I was intending, but luckily it ended up working out kind of well. That would actually be a pretty interesting strategy if she had the moves for it. Drop down some sort of cage so that enemies can't escape and you can wail on them. Interesting idea for co-op strats, I suppose. But yeah, you definitely want to use this to keep enemies away from you as this character. Armored Mohawk Cyclopses don't become significantly easier with this upgrade path, even though you've got the extra splash radius and a little bit of increased damage. Coming up to where the first Hex run died, and I suppose there's a new thing you have to worry about. Accidentally catching the Archean Bomber's bombs on your Bone Wall in a position that's unretrievable for you, but still in a position where if you stand near it, you get exploded and damaged. So watch out for that when you're playing as Hex. Overall, Hex is one of my favorite characters from the original 32. I think I prefer Bone Crafter slightly over Shade Master, but I can definitely understand using both upgrade paths. It's a little disappointing that her Wow Pow is so over-centralizing that you kind of have to use it all the time. But then again, why wouldn't you want an attack that's 280 damage?